Watching DevOps, the good, the bad, the ugly. This video cast series is really about all things related to DevOps, but we also place an emphasis on security. My name is Zach Nord, and I'm your host. Today I have with me Sean Poris, who is the Director of Product Security at Verizon Media. Sean, thanks for joining me today.
Zach, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Sean, maybe to start off, can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure thing. So, I started out in IT doing software development, and then I moved into sort of larger systems integration projects. I then dug into project management. I became known sort of at IBM as the troubled projects project manager. Then I segued into getting into cybersecurity. It just sounded really interesting, so I became a cybersecurity project manager. Then, with my background in software development, there's a natural fit in AppSec and ProdSec, and then I've been building ProdSec functions for just over 10 years now.
That's awesome. I appreciate you joining me. I've been enjoying following your work. I think the first time I met you was at one of the DevSecOps leadership forums where I saw you speak, and enjoyed that. So what are you passionate about these days? You've had a long journey. What gets you excited?
There's so much out there, but I got to tell you right now, I'm really focused on this notion of how do we groom leaders in product security or in security? How do you build sort of that bench depth, the minor league system, the next set of coaches and talent to drive us forward? So I'm constantly thinking about that right now and how we get opportunities into the right people's hands and keep pressing and grooming them and challenging them to take that next step in their career.
Yeah. Are you building a program around that, Sean, in order to help people advance in their careers, or what does that look like?
Yeah, there's a combination of things. I mean, right now it's just sort of being creative with my leadership team and constantly jamming on where there's hidden pockets of talent and how we can cultivate that. I do think, programmatically, I want to take it to that next level. So there's the system that you go through now, but we're still actively building that out.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, when I look at, the application security and product security today, there's kind of the cloud crew, right? The cloud teams, as well as the on-premise, and how we're kind of merging the two together as we're trying to make that journey to the cloud. Can you share about any thoughts about, just about the topic in general? And is there any difference, anything that you should be thinking about?
Yeah, there's a lot out there around sort of this notion of, don't lift and shift into cloud, right? Don't take what you have on your on-prem infrastructure and just slap it in there. Really think about the design of cloud controls, what you have available to you. I do think that there's so much opportunity afforded to us right now in the security field around how quickly you can spin up and spin down cloud infrastructure, and you can sort of align with the pace of play of the business when you've got cloud capabilities, and making sure that the controls that you once had on-prem that maybe are a little bit more mature, that you are actively researching and evaluating what you have at your fingertips to enable the pace of play in the cloud.
Absolutely. So as someone that's kind of leading product security, what are the things that you're hoping that your team looks at in order to facilitate that business need, right, of being able to spin up the infrastructure quickly, but also secure it?
Yeah, one of the things that I think are super key there is just making sure that you've got all of the sort of initial expectations set, that you're doing, a threat model for your cloud applications, for your cloud infrastructure, that you've got the appropriate baselines in place so that everybody knows where they need to start from, and you can measure against those, making sure that you've got the right scanning tech and ability to identify any vulnerabilities a little bit sooner, because of how fast things can move in the cloud versus traditional on-prem.
No, that's great. So, and are you also focused on kind of the CI/CD pipeline as well, or?
Yeah. So we've been talking about this a lot within Verizon Media, but it's really interesting the language that we have within. You're focusing from a DevOps standpoint. I'm focusing from a security standpoint. But look, we're trying to enable developers, builders to, from the beginning, own and deliver secure products throughout the life cycle. So it's just not about the old traditional AppSec, scan at the end, hand somebody a report, get it fixed, it's too late, that kind of a thing. So no, I'm hyper interested in DevOps, and we had a conversation with some of our execs who were really, really solid. But when we said, "Are you familiar with DevSecOps?" They're like, what's DevSecOps?
Right.
Because security is layered into DevOps for them. I think DevSecOps is this thing that we've created in the security industry. People can get kind of religious about this, but I feel like it should be DevOps, and you just have security layered into it. Other people want to have a DevSecOps practice. That's a whole separate topic. But I found it really interesting when I'm talking to builders. They're like, no, we're doing security. Here's how we do DevOps. Here's our pipelines. Right? It was kind of just a different conversation. It was really fun to see them go, DevSecOps, what are you talking about? Right? Not that we don't do it, we just don't call it that thing. But anyway, how do you integrate security into a developer ethos? That is huge, and that makes our job easier down the line. So no, I'm a huge fan of a function being part of how is the product being created, and being part of CI/CD pipelines, and everything that's happening with DevOps is critical.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And it's funny that I think technically the video cast series is called DevSecOps, the good, the bad, the ugly. But you notice I called it something differently, right? Just because all my conversations with people, some people call it that, and that's great. But ultimately, when you're speaking to the development leaders who you're ultimately trying to get on board with your program, I think terminology can be important. So that makes sense to me. So what?
Well, for sure. And Zach, just super quickly, right? Do you have dev privacy ops? Do you have dev quality ops? Do you have dev performance? You don't, right? You have DevOps. And so why does security get its special little flavor? I think it's an industry thing that what we're trying to do, and rather let's just layer into what DevOps teams are doing.
Right, and yeah, that makes complete sense. So, what are ways that you're seeing that they're wanting for you to communicate, meaning development leaders or the development teams, these security controls, as you're trying to automate that feedback? How are you doing that? Is there anything that you would say that they're asking for, requesting that you're trying that you learned is beneficial? Is it in the pipelines, or is it in the source control management that they're wanting to see this, or is the IDEs, or how do you the buzzword of shifting left, but really we're just trying to integrate it into that DevOps practice. Any thoughts there?
I would say it's funny the shift that's happened over the last 10 years or so. 10 years or so ago, when we were doing, ProdSec, AppSec, it was kind of like we would show up with findings, slap developers over the head. I'm not saying all of us, but as an industry, we kind of do that. Here's your report, go fix stuff.
Right.
And developers, oh my gosh, what do I do with it? And they go, and that would be that. Now, I think with the speed of tech, our developers now have the opportunity to look at us and say, no, you need to meet us at the pace of how we're developing. So how are your tools doing? And if you're still using some of the older tools, you can't keep pace. And so then they say, okay, you're not able to do what we need. We're going to go use, and I won't mention products or anything, but we're going to use something that's lighter weight, that's going to align with our pipelines, right? Okay, so that's pretty cool. So what we have to do now is we're being challenged to deliver security aligned with how fast developers are building. And I think one of the things that we have within the paranoids is we say no impossible guidance. So it's not one of those deals where I say, here's how you remediate, and by the way, that's not possible to do, right? That's not valuable at all. So
Sure.
how do we get the guidance? How do we get the requirements? How do we get the understanding of the security landscape into the developers' hands as early as possible? That is our charge. That is our responsibility now. And if we do that as security practitioners, we're gonna nail it when it comes to integrating with DevOps.
So reducing the signal on things to where the developers can actually focus on fixing the bugs or security issues rather than the old scan and scold model, so to speak, of tossing it over the fence, is what I was hearing.
Yeah, you want better signal. You want this sort of, what's the easy path to develop securely in my organization? If I pick these different widgets off of the shelves of the organization and I build with those widgets, am I going to be more secure and get through things much more quickly than if I start going rogue with what I'm using, right? And if I go rogue, hey, there might be a business need for that, so go ahead and go rogue, but that's going to add a little bit more time to your life cycle, because now we are going to have to take a look at some things more readily. So I think that combination, that balance, is how you can have the solid velocity for your organization and still balance that against risk management.
Absolutely. And so last kind of question on pulling at this thread here. John. So are they also, are they wanting speed, or is it the traditional kind of false positives that a lot of these tools, or is it both, right? The integration. So is it more like, hey, these are just noisy, they're not providing results that are helpful, meaning just security tools as general as you've kind of looked at it over the past decade, or is it, or what is it? I guess is kind of what types of requests are the development teams looking for?
There's a couple things. I think the first is to make sure the expectations are really clear at the outset. We've got really sharp developers now with a lot of great capabilities themselves in terms of their tooling
Sure.
to integrate code and to be deploying. So, making sure that expectations are set and they can be kind of pointed in the right direction. It's like we were just talking about playing golf a little bit earlier, and I had an old mentor who once talked to me about sort of, you make that early adjustment at the tee, and you're going to get so much closer to the hole. And if you look at where you start, you might be off a little bit just in front of the hole, but after a long period, you're going to diverge pretty significantly. So developers want to know how they tighten that up so they can get closer to the hole at the end. And then I don't know so much if it's the conversation about false positives. That's we've gotten past that. I mean, one of the guys on my team always says, if you deliver a whole bunch of false positives to a developer the first time, they're not using your tool again. They're done with you, right? So you don't even have that tolerance anymore. But I think it's more about developer enablement. It's not about security compliance slapped on top. It's developer enablement and security integrated into what they do.
Yeah, that's great. So shifting gears a little bit to another thing that I know you're involved in is a bug bounty program. You built one out. You've been involved in that. Can you share a little bit about if someone's trying to start a bug bounty program? What's the secret sauce in building one?
Wow, that's
Or
probably a
just
talk.
you don't have to give the secret sauce away, right?
No, it's not the secret sauce. I mean, it's there's actually trying to make this something that all organizations can do. So I'm totally happy to do that. I think it's a really big topic. But
Yeah,
I'd say the first thing is when you're looking at bug bounty, if this is a control point that you want to have in your organization, what do you want it to achieve? There's a whole bunch of different kinds of bug bounty programs. Strategic element that's part of your the set of controls and the ethos of your organization, or is it bug bounty in name only? You want to say you have one, you want to check the box that you've got one, but you're not really ready to incorporate it, or maybe a VDP, a vulnerability disclosure program by itself, and not necessarily something that's enabling the entire ecosystem of your external researchers or hackers, your bug bounty team, your product security function, your vulnerability management team, your incident response team. There's a lot that happens. You just have to be prepared for what you're trying to achieve.
great, great. So I guess one other question here, Sean, that's been pretty popular is software supply chain attacks after SolarWinds. What's your thoughts on the topic? I mean, obviously there's lots of different types of software supply chain attacks, but just in general, what are you seeing out there?
Oh, there's been so much research. There was stuff happening obviously before SolarWinds. There's a hyper focus on it. Now very significant. I think the big thing is taking a look from all the way from the first line of code you write and any third parties or a third party libraries open source that you pull into your code, all the way through all your pipeline to your build environment. How are you securing that? And so I think taking a look at the threat model and the threat landscape for your build environment and systematically plucking off what you need to do in order to build up your assurance levels is pretty much every organization needs to be doing that after what we saw with SolarWinds.
Absolutely. So the last part, we're at the ugly part of the video cast series. So maybe what's a lesson learned, a challenge, a failure, something that you went through in your career that you could share that you learned from?
Yeah, I'm thinking back to the very first time I tried to stand up sort of a satellite program or champions program for product security.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those situations where it was so classic, where you start out and there's a lot of energy, and then the ability to sustain a champions program it's so fleeting and difficult. And so this one, it started, and then it just kind of died on the vine. I couldn't quite figure out. It's like grabbing a greased watermelon in a pool. I kept trying to grab it and I kept missing it. We'd have community sessions and we'd, try to offer them tools and bring in guest speakers, and just slowly but surely the number of people who were attending kind of just
Yeah.
dribbled down to nothing. And I sort of, I said I had a program and I had one in theory at that point, but it had died. And so, I'm always hyper interested in, I think the concept of federating security into developers is fantastic. I totally agree with it and buy into it. I think the way you do it and how you fit it into the culture and the ethos of development at your organization is critical. And
Yeah.
so understanding that and figuring out the motivations and how to keep the motivational drive going is critical. And I was on one panel recently and we were talking about this, and one of the items that came up was said, just pay the champions. You got to pay them. If you're a champion, you get 10% more. I'm like, do you have any idea? If you're small org, maybe you can pull that off, but to pull that off in a large org, just like I mentioned earlier, people who think about privacy, do I pay them extra? People who think about quality, do I pay them extra? So having these deputy paranoids, or sorry, that's what we call it in Verizon Media, but having these folks who are in this role, how else can I motivate and keep them fired up to keep attending? How do you align it with their interests and have the thing grow? And so we're in the stage where we've gotten past where I've failed before. I'm not the one leading it right now, by the way, so I can't take too much credit for it. But I'm looking forward to see what do we do differently in the next year or two that keeps it growing and thriving versus dying on the vine like that happened to me. So that one was, I cannot put that feather in my cap. I feel pretty good on that one.
Well, hey, I appreciate the transparency, and I have more failures than I'd like to admit. So no, that was a great learning experience. And Shua from United Health Group actually came on and talked about just that. And it seems like there's just a lot of challenges as you build out a program. He's looking to open source that project. Love to introduce you to him, or maybe whoever in your organization is working on it, as a community to come together to figure out that. I think this is great.
Yeah, grab the person who was successful. Don't grab me.
Sounds good.
Learning opportunity, right? Learning opportunity.
There you go. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time coming on. Glad we were able to make it happen finally. And again, appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun, Zach. Thank you.